Hi there, I'm Scott, and this is Scott's Synth Stuff. In this series, we go through all the different synthesizers I currently own, starting with the simplest one and working our way up to the most complex. Today, in episode 4, we look at the Roland JD-Xi. Coming up next. The Roland JD-Xi is either the worst piece of garbage that you would ever want to buy, or it's a fantastic deal, best synthesizer you can buy for $500. Or maybe it's both. I love this thing, I hate this thing. Let me tell you why. So basically the JD-Xi is a Roland groove box with a bonus keyboard and some extra controls. Kind of. It's kind of targeted to the same audience. It's packed with unusable, awful, horrible techno sequences. You know when you get a Roland groove box and you just dial through all the preset patterns and things and you hit play and it's just like this raucous, awful, worst techno noise you've ever heard. Just unlistenable garbage. You know, like this. And of course, it's got a ton of presets in there, just like that one. A lot of people just use it like that. They don't go any farther than just the presets, and they use it just as a beat-making machine. And the front panel is actually laid out to make it easy to work like that. Now you may notice a resemblance between the JD-Xi and the JD-Xa, which is its big brother that was released at the same time. It looks the same, a lot of the controls seem the same, and they marketed it as the little sister or the little brother to the JD-Xa. But don't be fooled, they are nothing alike. They have completely different architecture, different sound engines, different capabilities. They're not in any way related other than that they look the same and they both have digital and analog engines, sort of. Oh, and of course the JD-Xa is 5 times the price of the JD-Xi. Now this is actually a really great synth for scratch pad writing. If you want to take it with you somewhere, it's portable, it's small. You could just plug in a pair of headphones and just work on some music. It's got a drum engine in it with a very capable drum machine. It's got digital engines with all kinds of different sounds, everything from pianos to way out there space sounds. It's a very capable little box, especially for composition with the typical Roland pattern sequencer. It has 129 note polyphony, which I know is an odd number. Usually you see 128 or 64 or 32 or that sort of thing. Well, it actually has 128 digital voices and 1 analog voice. And yes, it does have a pure analog synth engine in it, if you could call it that. It's got an extremely capable arpeggiator with 128 patterns, not just typical up, down, and random. It's actually got bass line, sequences, all kinds of different arpeggiated patterns that you can actually use in your compositions. And of course, the Roland sequencer, I believe it's a 64-step sequencer, if I remember correctly. It has the typical, you can record in real time, you can do step-by-step, or you can use the Roland TR Rec, which is all the way back from the TR-808, same type of sequencer. It records velocity and sysx, so if you make adjustments to filters or effects or anything as part of recording in the sequence, it actually records that into the sequencer and plays it back, which is a nice feature. You can see it has 2 digital synth engines, 1 and 2. Each of these has 3 voices that can be layered together. Each of those voices can be a waveform, so it could be sawtooth or square wave or sine or whatever, or a PCM waveform like a piano sound or a bell or whatever. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sounds in there. Next we have a drum engine, which is entirely sample based. And then we have the analog synth engine, which is a monophonic analog synthesizer that's extremely limited. We have sawtooth, triangle, and pulse or square wave. If we have a look at the analog engine, we have sawtooth, triangle, square wave, and we can adjust the duty cycle on that square wave. We also have a sub-oscillator 1 or 2 octaves below. We also have a low-pass filter. Now we're in analog mode. The only filter type we have is a low-pass filter. And for analog, that's it. That's the entire analog engine of the synthesizer. It's extremely limited. It's not much good for anything but, maybe bass lines. We do have 256 factory presets that we can scroll through here. Those you cannot change, but we also have 256 user presets that you can change. And each preset includes all 4 engines plus all of your effects and filter settings. In addition, we have favorites. So we have 16 banks of 16 favorites. So if we go into favorite mode, we can say, I want Shift 1 gives us our first bank, Shift 2 gives us our second bank, and so on. And then each bank you have 16. And simply by pressing one of these, it switches to whatever program you have set up. So now we're on favorite number 1. So that's a great way. If you have a song set up and maybe your song consists of 4 different stages, you can just have those 4 stages in there and switch between them. Actually, I have that set up in here. When I first got this thing and I was playing around with it, I thought, well, I'll just make something really simple. And so we'll go here, and hopefully this doesn't get me a copyright strike, but so you get the idea. You can have a whole song set up with all the different parts of the song in sequence set up in your favorites, and you can just tap as you go through, and you can go back and change and play over top of them. And whichever light is lit up here is what the keyboard is making. So you can alter, and if I go into drums, I'm always going to hit the drums and analog synth. Obviously, we have filter and resonance. Amplifier, all we have is an envelope knob, and if I set this up, you can hear what it does. If I get rid of the reverb. So we don't have a typical ADSR envelope. It just, here it's kind of, the decay is increased. Here we have no envelope. Here the attack and release are extended. And we can also alter the level of the envelope on the amplifier. So it's not a very flexible envelope, at least not on the front control board. There actually is a full ADSR control in here, both for the amplifier and for the filter, but in order to get it, you have to go menu diving on this horrible little 2-line LCD display. I don't do it. We have an LFO. The LFO has all the typical, random sample and hold. You can adjust the rate, you can adjust the depth. You can't sync it to your tempo, unfortunately. It can affect pitch, filter, or amplifier. And then over here we have effects. So we have effect number 1, which is our distortion, fuzz, compressor, and bit crusher. You can pick one of the above. So if I pick a note here. Here's our distortion, fuzz, compressor, which obviously we're not going to hear. And then bit crusher. Effect 2, we get a flanger, phaser, ring mod, or slicer. There's our flanger, phaser, ring mod. And slicer, which is just like a chopping effect. Then we have a standard delay and a reverb. very basic effects. We have our tempo. You can adjust it because it has this little tiny 37 key keyboard. We have to have octave up and down buttons. And then of course our arpeggiator. Okay, the pattern sequencer is a standard real-time step record, or the TR Rec, which is the same type of sequencer that's been used by Roland since the TR 808 and so on. So if we want to, we'll just set up with a 909 kit here. We set a bass drum, and we want that on the 4s. So we can play that. Now we want a clap, and we will put that on the 2 and the 4. And how about a hi-hat? We'll do a quiet one. And an open hi-hat. And we will make some, actually let's use some louder ones. So we hit it louder, we get to record the velocity louder, and we'll make every other one louder. So you see how that works. The sounds are all set up and categorized fairly nicely. So if I switch to strings or pad, I'm going to get all kinds of pad sounds. And of course, we have leads, which are mostly monophonic, bass sound, including quite a few TB303 acid type of sounds in there, which is nice. We get just standard piano sounds. Not high fidelity, but you know, maybe good for house music. I love that they included the Fairlight Sarah in here. I'll get some reverb in there. Envelope. I use this one all the time. Okay, so I said I love it and I hate it. So what do I love about this? I love the sound engine. You just heard the Sarah sound from the Fairlight in there. I use this as a sound module a lot. I especially use this for the drum machines. It's got TR-606 sample sets in there, 707, 808, 909. In fact, there's multiple versions of the 808 in there with all kinds of different settings. So you have, you know, long drawn out bass drums or short and sharp and snappy sounds. The sample set of drum machines in this thing are incredible. It even has a CR78 in there, which you can hear. I mean, everybody knows what that is. That's your CR78 right there. I use this for a drum machine all the time. It also has sampled analog drums, you know, real rock drums, all kinds of techno, hip hop sounds. The drum sample set in this thing is incredible, and the way you can edit it in the sequencer makes it really quick and easy to use. You can use this thing on the fly as a drum machine only. Even if you only ever use this as a drum machine, for $500, you can't beat it. It's got every sample of every drum machine you'd ever want to use in it. Oh, and by the way, do you like my 808 shirt? Thanks to Claudio at Dr. Mix for that. If you haven't checked out the Dr. Mix channel, you are missing out. Check out the link. I put it in the description below. It has a vocoder. If you notice, there's a microphone right on here. The vocoder in this is actually my favorite of all that I own. The vocoder in my Modi X is crap. The vocoder in my System 8 is not bad, but the vocoder in this is really quite good. The default is ensemble, and if I just track into it while I'm playing chords in the higher chords all day, all the time. It also has some other kind of neat vocoder sounds in it, like a fifth in a like a major fifth stack. Or, I don't know, robot sound, rise up. It's got what sounds like it has one called a VP330, which doesn't sound much like a VP330, but it's not bad. Here's my VP330, my VP330. This is what it sounds like in the VP330. So it's trying to emulate that VP330 string machine sound, not very well. It's got a bunch of voice altering things. You can make your voice go an octave higher or an octave lower.
Change my voice into a soprano.
Or into a bass.
It even has a function that takes a little bit of practice, but you can set it up so that it listens to your voice as you sing into the microphone, listens to whatever pitch you're singing, and then plays that on the keyboard. So if you have a singer who can't play keyboard and you want a synth line or a piano line or something that is whatever that singer is just going to sing, all you got to do is tell them to sing to the microphone, hold the key down, and it will actually pitch the sound to whatever the singer is singing. Kind of cool. Now the one drawback is whenever the vocoder is enabled, you lose the analog synth engine. Not a huge loss because the analog synth engine, well, it sucks. Okay, that's what I love about this thing, and I do use this all the time, especially for the drum machines. What I hate about it, the keybed. This keyboard sucks. It's the worst keyboard of any synth I've ever owned or ever used. It's terrible. The black keys, if you look at my Yamaha CS, it's also mini keys, but I can actually play this because the black keys are skinny enough that I can get my fingers between them, and I don't have big fat fingers. This thing, I can't play chords up in here because anytime I try to play a white key, I end up hitting black keys as well. So it's utterly useless. The keyboard itself is fragile. If you go on the internet, you see that people are breaking these things all the time. You never want to do glissandos on it because you're going to end up busting keys off. And these things are just held in place with the tiniest little flexible piece of plastic, and they break easy. So the keyboard sucks. Similarly, the pitch and mod wheels are a joke. They're tiny little toys. The pitch wheel's too stiff. The mod wheel is also too stiff. They're tiny, there's not enough travel. Honestly, they would have been better off just making this a sound module with an external keyboard, or I was gonna say make it a full size, but then they're intruding on their JD-Xi market, so it is what it is. The keyboard sucks. The display, I mentioned that already. It's a tiny little 2-line display, LCD. It's only 32 characters, and this thing is a rabbit hole when it comes into menus. The menu diving in order to do all the functionality that is actually possible to do in this is insane. And you will stand here for hours, and there's no dials to actually, so every time you want to go through a menu, you got to use your cursor and value keys, these buttons, to go up and down. So if you want something that's 16 levels down on the menu, you got to hit that button 16 times, enter down to the next level, and maybe another 8 buttons. So it takes forever to do anything on this, which means you never do anything on this because nobody is going to use the stupid menu in this thing to adjust, the ADSR on the filter. First off, they don't even know that it exists unless they read the terrible manual that comes with it from Roland, because all the Roland manuals are terrible. So nobody even knows half the functions that actually exist in this thing. Shift controls, I know I keep harping on this over and over again. The Roland Gaia is similarly bad. It doesn't even have a display. So all the menu functionality has to be done with shift key combinations, and there's multiple shift key combinations. This one's the same. You got a shift button here, so when you press that, this button does this, but if you press shift, it does something else. It's not even marked on here, so you got to remember it, or you got to have the manual in front of you because it's tough to remember the stuff that's not even marked. It's somewhat intuitive, but not really. The analog synth, it's limited, it doesn't sound good, it's a gimmick. They wanted to say, hey, look, it's a hybrid synth, it's digital and true analog, which it is. It has a true analog synthesizer in there, analog oscillator, digitally controlled analog oscillator, but it is analog. It does have an analog filter, analog circuit path, but it sucks. The sound is awful. It only has a few waveforms. The filter is very limited. It's a gimmick. Use it to maybe make some bass sounds, but that's all you're going to use it for. And lastly, the limited controls. Seriously, your ADSR, this is your envelope. Instead of proper ADSR controls that have been like every synth since the beginning of time, they just stuck it into one knob. What were you thinking, Roland? That's just lazy and cheap. Yes, you can adjust the ADSR, but you have to go menu diving down the rabbit hole through this tiny little display here to get there. So, do the negatives outweigh the positives? It depends on what you want to use it for, but there is something that may sway your choice, because for all the failings that this thing has in terms of user interface and menuing and functions that are buried or hidden that you don't even know that exist, there's actually a solution, because there is another JD-Xi manager that was written and put out for free out on the internet. Now, it does not have full functionality. There are some things in it, like the effects, the system settings, the arpeggiator, that are apparently coming soon, but the last update to that program was 2.5 years ago and it hasn't been released since, so I suspect it will never be updated again. But it lets you edit everything else. So let's have a look at that. Now I'll put a link to the JD-Xi manager down in the description below. When you first start it up, you need to select the JD-Xi, and then you can click test, and it will play a note just to let you know that it's working. So now we can go in and either edit effects. We can either edit either of the digital synthesizer, the drum engine, or the analog synth engine. Let's start with the analog synth engine. Okay, so I'm going to start the synth up just playing a simple ARP so that we can hear the sounds. As you can see, you can actually have pulse width modulation from the LFO, which you can't do from the keyboard panel. You can turn off the sub-oscillator. You can change your pitch envelope. We can change the LFO shape and size and so on, rate, fade time. We can sync the LFO to the tempo from here, which we have to go menu diving to do in the keyboard itself. If we want to change this to amplification. We can change the rate. We can also adjust the mod control so that the mod wheel affects pitch or filter or amplification or LFO rate from here. We have a low pass filter set up for the analog. We can change the cutoff, resonance, key follower. Here's our filter envelope, which we don't have on the keyboard. And then of course here's our ADSR for the amplifier as well. And then we can do portamento as well, if it's turned on. And of course it's not going to do it on the arpeggio, but we could do it. Let's turn off the arpeggiator, so you can hear that take effect. And one of the neat things you can do on this is randomize a patch. So you can just generate random patches. That's kind of cool. Next we have the digital editor. So editing the digital engine, just like the analog. Of course, there's a lot more parameters for the digital engine. We won't go through all of them, but we have a knit tone. We can change what category it is. Is it polyphonic, or we can do monophonic? Ring modulation on or off. We've got unison on here, so we can have how many 8 unison voices. Tone level, analog feel, wave shaping, portamento legato, portamento time, octave shift, and so on. If we look here, we can see the partials. I mentioned each digital engine has 3 separate parts. So you can see there's 3 separate voices. Each voice has its own LFO, LFO modulation, oscillator, filter, amplification envelope, filter envelope, pitch modulation, and we can combine those all through together or turn them on and off. So if I set this one up as a triangle, and this one's going to be square, and this one's going to be sample and hold. So this editor allows you to edit all the different parameters for this digital engine in this one little screen here. And of course you can save it as a patch locally, so you can expand far beyond what was in the synthesizer itself. Then we get to my favorite one, the drum editor. As you can see, we have a separate setting for every different drum instrument. And for each of those settings, We can say it's going to be a multi or a single. We can change the waveforms we want. So let's see, on my kick here, I want the left channel to be an 808 kick, and you can see there's a ton of different 808 kicks in here. So let's just pick one of these at random. And on the right channel, I want it to actually be, I don't know, open hi-hat from a 707. So you can hear that's exactly what it's playing. So that sounds terrible, so let's put a kick in there. So now I've got a short 808 kick on the left and a sharp 808 on the right. So let me add some snare into there. And I will put that on 2 and 4. So if we go to the snare drum, I can say, well, I want the snare to be, let's see, a rock. Let's see, we got a rock snare in here somewhere. Or how about a clap? It could be a clap on the left. And percussive organ on the right. It's absolutely limitless what you can do. You can create any kind of drum set that you want. I mean, this is a ridiculous example, but you can create your own drum set that is, you know, the bass drum or the kick drum from an 808 and the snare from a 909 and the hi-hat from a CR78, and you can create your own drum kit bespoke this way, so you can have all these different sounds and set up for all these different things. And if you want, you can split it across from channel, and you've got all kinds of different filters, amplitude. You can adjust the envelope of these for each of these individual sounds. So if I want the bass drum to be filtered off, above a certain frequency, and I want the amplitude envelope to change, and it's so flexible, and you never know that the tiny little JD-Xi has this level of functionality unless you had an editor like this. And lastly, we have the effects. We can see we got our effects 1 and 2. We can change each setting. Each of the settings has far more settings than we show on this. I mean, look at the compressor. We can actually sidechain the compressor. Believe it or not, we can this compressor that's built into the effects, it has sidechain capability, which you'd never know about just from looking at that tiny little JD-Xi control panel. We got the phaser, we got a delay. Look at all the different functions we can do in the delay. We can actually have, the delay has sends for the reverbs. We can adjust how much of the delay gets sent to the reverb. Just the amount of functionality in here. Look at the reverbs on the keyboard itself. You get reverb on off with a knob. Here, look at this. We have all kinds of different reverbs, different time, damping level. It's just so there's so much functionality in the effects editor and in the editor in general that gives you the ability to edit all the stuff in the JD-Xi that you'd never even know was there. All right, that's it. That's the Roland JD-Xi. Yes, you can see I am enthusiastic about it once you get your fingers into what you can actually do with especially with that editor, because this thing is so deep and so capable and has so much functionality. You just never know it because it looks like a groove box, works like a groove box. People use it like a groove box. If you look online, people are just making little beats with it. But it's actually a full-fledged synthesizer with quality effects, quality sounds, a full-fledged drum machine. This is a really complex and useful thing. Of course, Roland saddled it with this horrible key bed and the horrible interface and the horrible menuing system, the horrible display, but inside it's a knockout. And that's why I use this primarily as a sound module, because it is so capable inside. And plus it's portable, so it's fun to take out and use on vacation or what have you. It's portable, you can play with it. It's actually useful, you can get usable sounds out of it and actually create music on it. All right, I hope you like what you saw here today. If you did, please go ahead, click subscribe and that bell down below. It really helps us out. If you like what you saw, you have some comments on this, leave a comment down below. If there's something you liked, let us know. If it's something you didn't like, hey, let us know. We really appreciate the advice, either positive or negative. We've got another video coming up next. It's been really tough to try to pick which synth I'm going to do next. I was really on the fence as to which one was going to be next, the JD-Xi or one of the others, but you'll find out soon. Thanks for watching.